Well, it's really great to have you both here today and to talk with you about AI, about Formel 1, about data. And definitely we want to dive into the topic of data strategy and AI in Formula 1 and explore as well a bit maybe how other sports or other industries maybe can learn from this high performance environment. Before we dive into that topic though, I would have a question for you both. You could quickly introduce yourself, your name, your position, and maybe as well share a bit about your journey, how you kind of entered the field you're working in.
Yes, so I'm Ruth Buscombe. I'm an F1 strategist. I work for Formula 1 as a strategist, analyst and presenter for F1 TV. And my other role is I am the AWS Motorsports ambassador and technical advisor. So AWS is the technical partner for Formula 1. They are our strategy department, so they help us not only do a lot of the hard work behind the scenes, actually means the broadcast happens globally around the world, but they're also the ones that help us tell the data stories to our 827 million fans across the world. So instead of being a strategist for 2 drivers, I like to think that I'm now a strategist for 1 in 8 people on Earth, so no pressure. My journey to my role now started about 15 years ago. So I studied aerospace and aerothermal engineering at Cambridge. I did my master's thesis on something called the DRS, which is the part of a Formula 1 car that it was introduced to aid overtaking with the FIA, which is the governing body of Formula 1. From there, I was kind of interviewed and moved to Scuderia Ferrari. So I worked as simulation engineer for 4 seasons and as car-based strategist, working with drivers such as Felipe Massa, Kimi Räikkönen, Fernando Alonso, Sebastian Vettel. And then I moved over to be head of race strategy. I did 1 season, so that's racing, going to all of the races at Haas, and then 8 seasons actually here in Zurich with Alfa Romeo and Sauber. So I'm very, very close to my old home. I drove past it already on the way to the airport. But then in 2024, I was reunited with my first boss, Stefano Domenicali, who was the team principal of Scuderia Ferrari when I first started my career, now president of F1. And now I work with F1 basically as their strategist. So it's everything from helping develop the insights that you see on Formula 1. So AWS have 24 different insights that help tell the data stories behind the scenes. That's everything from how fast a Formula 1 car is going around to the corner to predictive insights, but where the pit stop might happen in Formula 1 to exactly how close a Formula 1 car gets to the wall, or whether a car is losing 3.51 seconds when they go off on turn 14 in Singapore. And then so working as a presenter and getting to come to cool events like this and tell even more people and make it so we have 827 and 1 fan hopefully by the end of the interview.
I love that. It's like recruiting always, like inspiring new fans, reaching out more. So I'm Elif Dogan. I lead our media entertainment games and sports practice for AWS professional services team here in the region. So I've been focusing on sports customers a lot over the last couple of years, and very closely, I'm also a big fan of a lot of sports. Moved to Zurich, I'm based in Zurich, moved to Zurich 3 years ago from New York. Just like on a personal level, explore European lifestyle, and I'm loving it. And and of course, not just like being in the US, sports was such a huge part of me, and my background is actually in private equity and global financial services, so completely different. Always in tech, but then I moved to Europe. I actually took over this role and working very closely with like Formula 1, National Football League in the US, Bundesliga, and PGA Tour, like all the sports organizations, but also media customers as well.
Okay, very, very interesting, very impressive background, I have to admit. So we dive into AI and data strategy. So for you, Ruth, Formula 1, as you already mentioned, it is a very data-intensive school. What does, for you, a good data strategy look like on a race week and a race day?
That's a really good question. So a good data strategy in Formula 1 is one where you can reliably, efficiently, and accurately get to the data point or data points that actually help you make decisions that are going to add to your race weekend. Now for Formula 1, that's how we can isolate the data points and turn those into stories for the fans. For a Formula 1 team, it's how you can extract meaningful insights and make decisions and performances based on the data points that will give you a slight edge over your competitor. And why is that so important? Because a Formula One car makes 1.1 million data points per second. So across a race weekend, it's the equivalent of streaming around 1,600 Netflix movies simultaneously. So you can think about this sea of data that's coming off the car that's going around 200 miles an hour, maybe 300 kph on a circuit that could be 10,000 miles away. If we are racing in Melbourne and your data center is in Europe, it's very important that you have not only reliable transmission capture of remote data from something that's quite a difficult challenge, but also that you're able to extract the most important data points, and the ones that whether or not it's telling a story, as we say, whether or not those are the data points that help us predict what's going to happen as a team or as a broadcaster in order to explain the story. Because the thing about Formula One is, our story isn't happening on a pitch. It's not happening, where you can see it. It's around a 5-kilometer track, and often cars are in a fierce battle, but they're not racing next to each other on track. There's different strategies at play. There's elements about whether you're racing ahead or behind. Some teams are doing different strategies. A lot of it is to do with whether you can forecast and optimize better than your competitor. And Formula One is an efficiency formula. So our 10 Formula One teams, we'll have 11 next year, they operate within a budget cap, have done for a few years now, which means it's all about doing more efficiently than your competitor, and actually leveraging AI solutions in an ability to do something more accurately or more efficiently than your competitor isn't just a nicety, it's an absolute necessity. Because in Formula One, take the 2024 season, the average between first and last was 1.3%. So with margins that small, when you're looking for marginal gains, so for example, pole at the Grand Prix in Zandvoort was set by 12 thousandths of a second, which is the equivalent of probably your height across a whole racetrack in terms of difference between first and second. Actually, if you can do anything slightly more accurately, slightly faster, or with slightly less resource, freeing up more resource to do more, it gives you an edge in Formula One. And those are the data stories we love to be able to tell to our fans at home. So it doesn't just look like cars going around in a circle. I see already we've got one.
I know. I should see. We're getting definitely you're going to.
But can you give us a bit kind of like as well the look behind the scene, behind the data side of it? How does it emerge and what is it based on this technology? Elif talks more about the technology.
Absolutely. So, I think Ruth kind of talked about from how they're approaching when it comes to how it's helpful, making split-second decisions and in a high-intensity environment, right? So it's all about how we are going to utilize data to help the teams and the racers, people who are actually doing the sports on the field, to be more successful, better decision making, more informed decision, and create their strategy. So we created F1 Insights together with F1 and AWS. So as Ruth mentioned, we are collecting 1.1 million data points per second in a racetrack, and each track is in different locations, right? So the shape of the track and the way how it's basically created is different. So what that means is then we have this whole operations of the event technical center where Formula One creates this kind of on-site location where they build this whole production facility that we collect data from the track to the production facility in real time through this data streaming. And then that data then gets transferred to remote operation control, which is the media center in Biggin Hill, and then in real time. And then that is basically processed through AWS, which is through the serverless architecture, which we can get into details if you're interested in. Is serverless architecture, so it's an event-driven architecture, which allows us to real-time process this through using machine learning models to process all these and create all these advanced statistics that Ruth was mentioning. So whether it's prediction or predicting, when is this car going to do a pit stop? What is their strategy? What is the likelihood of undertaking, for example, is a big one. and like when are they going to change their tire, like all these like I mean, Ruth can talk a lot about that part, how it's actually happening in that split-second decision making. But really, our goal is to allow the teams to really make those decisions in an informed way. And one thing that I want to mention, this whole process that I described is under 1 second, including broadcasting internationally. So when I talk about this the process, sometimes it's like exactly because data traveling all these places, but it's actually in real time, under 1 second, and it's displayed in real time to broadcast through F1 TV and international part.
You mentioned now about whether it goes wrong, when does the car for pits or what it takes to split seconds. Can you quickly describe what the data is used? You have different, let's say, audience city, the driver, the engineers, the bodiers, maybe the attendees. I don't know. Can you give us a...
Okay, so each of the 24 different insights that we have in Formula One, powered by AWS, are indicative of the different kind of KPIs that we have as Formula One team. So given we haven't got all day, I'll talk to you about my personal favorite one, which is an insight called Close to the Wall. So let me set the scene for you. We're going to be in the Monaco Grand Prix. And we're in the final free practice session of the Monaco Grand Prix. So it's about 4 hours before qualifying that sets the grid for the Monaco Grand Prix. Now, it's the hardest one to overtake. So basically, if you can put your car in pole position, you qualify first in Monaco, pretty much guaranteed to win this race, and everybody wants to win it. Now, in the free practice sessions, we want to get as close as we can get to the walls of the Monaco Grand Prix, but we do not want that number to be a negative number, because if it's a negative number, we've crashed. And that's very expensive. And if you crash in the final practice of Monaco, the chance that they can rebuild your car for the qualifying, where the result actually matters, is probably about zero. So we want to, as a driver, we want to practice, but we don't want to take too much risk, because the risk versus reward in a practice session is less than in a qualifying session when the position actually counts for show. So a feedback loop that was historically very manual and very slow, done very labor intensively by graduates such as myself 15 years ago, where after each of the 3 practice sessions, we would go through video, photos, and we would feed back to our drivers qualitatively whether or not they were taking more risk or less risk than our competitors, and based on how fast we were, whether or not their appetite for risk should be more or less. So basically, if you start too far off the pace and you're going too slow, you're not taking enough risk, you'll never get there by the time it gets to qualifying. But we would have 3 goes at feeding this back. And it would basically be like, you need to take more or less risk than your competitor because we're going too slow. And if you don't, try it now, you're never going to get there for qualifying. Now, with an insight powered by AWS and similar technologies running across the teams, we can have this. So Charles Leclerc turns around the corner in turn 1, Saint-Avold in Monaco. That data is beamed off of that car to the Event Technical Center, back to the Formula One control center in Biggin Hill. It's powered up to AWS. Amazon SageMaker is waiting, ready. It's been trained on 75 years of Formula One data, combined with the live capture, which is a 4-stage process with high-speed cameras. We've trained it to know what's the closest part of the Formula One car to the wall. Then AWS Lambda fires up the second that piece of information is beamed. It's then ran, and we're able to, using the insights that we have, calculate how close the car is going to the wall, run through AWS DynamoDB to check it, stored, beamed back, and the insight is put on screen within 1 second. Now, it's exactly the same. So Ferrari, they're a team partner of AWS, so they have that same kind of level of data in the same time. So as Charles Leclerc is now coming out of the corner into turn 1, his race engineer can feed back. Actually, the longest latency is probably the race engineer keying up to speak to the driver and says, Charles, that was 1.2 centimeters away from the wall. That's a good job. We don't need to adjust. Or, Charles, that was 5 centimeters away from the wall. Next time round, you need to take more margin. And in fact, we don't even have to do that next time round. He can do that as he enters into turn 3 into the casino square. So now, instead of having 3 data points that are qualitative, we're able to give driver feedback to help drivers, engineers understand risk versus reward metrics. And there's so many different ways in which we do that. That's just one example. And also for the fans at home, when you're watching the Monaco Grand Prix, sure, you've got a car close to the wall, but actually the power of saying the car is 1.2 centimeters away from the wall whilst it's going, nearly 200 miles an hour. tells it gives you truth, and that's the power of data stories as well. So actually explaining what we're actually doing and why we're doing it, and then you can be an armchair here. You can be like, you know, they're never going to be on pole if they're 2.5, you know.
But you mentioned a very important topic, in which you mentioned in interviews before, the communication. Actually, you said 50% is management, so 50% of everything is strategy. So how do you translate all this, whether it's to the driver or to the engineers, in such aspects?
But it's very similar to the architecture of any good company, including AWS, is customer first. So it's about, what does my customer, whether that's Fred Vasseur, who's the team principal, whether that's Lewis Hamilton, who's my driver, or if I'm talking to engineers, how do they want the data? What level of data do they need to do a better job? And how do I communicate it to them? And actually, whether that's visual, whether that's audio, the way that we communicate data to whoever we're talking to is driven by how they need it. And the way that you're talking to a driver when they're driving around in the car is very different to the way that you communicate to a driver when they're out of the session and they have 2 hours to analyze data. So the example that we just gave now, probably that would be translated as being like, you know, take more risk, take less risk. Again, qualitative feedback. We have another AWS insight which shows the exact speed, throttle, delta to a competitor. That's the kind of insight that a driver would sit down and look at a visual image, but actually they'll be doing that in an office. So it's really driven by what your customer needs. And exactly the same thing for us when we're producing insights on a world feed. It's about not taking up space visually on a screen. It's about telling the story. So we will sync up a replay of a camera incident. So for example, Lando Norris, the Singapore Grand Prix example that I gave you, one of our most recent insights, is time lost. Whilst we're showing a replay of him going off in turn 14 in Singapore, we flash up an insight that says time lost 3.51 seconds, front left locker. So we're explaining the story, and then the commentators can pick up from that. We also have images such as track files where we're providing this as a written cue to our commentary team. So it doesn't necessarily need to be a visual thing. So they can say about the story, we can predict that, for example, there's going to be an overtake because our driver, maybe Valtteri Bottas, is catching Lance Stroll at 0.9 seconds, and that's flashed up through track pulse as a story to our commentary team, so they can pick up and they can drive the story how they want based on their broadcast.
And I think it's also very important to talk about the fans too, right? Like, I mean, there are like really avid F1 fans, like where they know every single rule, terminology, but there are also fans like yourself, hopefully now, that might not know some of the terminologies and what that really means. So, and also keep in mind that the track is around 500 kilometers, let's say, on the average. The broadcast can only show a certain part of it. So like what is happening, except like broader on the track, is very interesting story to tell. So I think F1 has quite a big challenge when it comes to like how do you engage the avid fans that are like really expert in the sports itself, but also how to target the fans that are like new, and especially after Netflix show. I can say that the interest is like a lot more higher towards Formula One, and I think it's educating new fans and telling that story becomes very important. And that track post that Ruth mentioned really enables those broadcasters, the commentators, to like really look at the stories and enhance their storytelling to explain what is really happening. It's not just a display of data, so to speak, for fans, but really engaging them along the journey.
What I'm interested now is where AI or design models are now over in this picture. So, because you said it's in split seconds that you decide whether you do that or that, or you're quicker, whatever, more risk or less risk. So how much do you rely on AI doing models, or on, let's say, you're trusted for intuition, baby, you can see like.
So I always say a gut feeling is just an LLM of your own experience. Effectively, you know, all you're doing is making a summation of every single data point you've seen or you've been exposed to. And actually it's all about augmenting that with statistically accurate analysis. And AI is there basically to help you. You know, it is in order pit wall, you're able to do more with less. we are limited. We're a resource limited, operation. Every Formula One team has the same budget cap, 135 million, for example, this year. So if you're able to do something accurately and cheaper, or more efficiently, we're able to do something else that your competitor doesn't do. So it's about being able to do the same kind of analysis that, honestly, it was so labor intensive. Like, I dread to think the number of hours of my day across my life I've spent compiling a safety car database, for example, which is for every single track on the calendar, going through footage and compiling a database. I went to a new team, so Ferrari already had one, obviously, because they've been operating for 75 years now. When I started at Haas, we didn't have one. So I had to go through and manually, for every single track, work out where every single time there was an accident that brought out a safety car neutralization, what caused it and why. You wouldn't believe the number of hours that compile, because there was no way of doing that programmatically, automatically. Now with a tool such as Amazon Nova, where we can, search multiple video files, I could have done that and then, gone for dinner. Rather than spending my entire Christmas holiday doing things. And that's just one example, but it's, why would you not do it? And obviously, with every single engineering tool, since it's start of time, you have a sign-off process, you have an accuracy checker, and AI is absolutely no different. That's all we do. Every time we implement a new technology, check it's accurate, and as long as it does, crack on.
And I think another one that I just came to my mind is root cause analysis. Like, this is a great example of operational efficiency. It's actually, so what happens is during the race, like if there's a event, like there's an F1 TV, right, where Formula One race is being broadcasted globally, and like let's say if there's a network drop, and for IT engineers, they have to troubleshoot, identify the root cause, and then come up with a solution. What they were struggling is, in some cases, just even identifying that what is the issue can take a day or more than a day. Maybe it's a couple hours, you don't know, but it's disrupting the actual flow, and this is just one example. But the solving, it can take up to 3 weeks. So what we came up with is using generative AI and Amazon Bedrock to be able to help them to not only analyze the root cause, but also help them through the agents solve those issues that are like time intensive for the team, so that they can focus on more important tasks and more strategic tasks. I think as a result, they were able to reduce the solving the problem by 86%. And from like more than a day identifying the causes to like what is the root cause issue to like just a couple hours or minutes in some cases. So that's a huge operational efficiency improvement for the team.
But that drives as well into the kind of idea of innovation, which is maybe the both of you, or for you particularly as well, to say, how can you then get all these learned insights as well, another tool on the peak performance, efficiency, optimization, to sustainable innovation. What is your take on that? Is that a good example?
Yeah, like from our personal, sorry, I missed that part.
Yeah, from your personal, for you, on AWS perspective.
Okay, got it. Sorry, just. So from my perspective, I think what we are really like excited to work with, not just Formula One, but all our global sports partnership, really helping them to address what is it they are trying to achieve, for whether it's their fans, whether it's their athletes or drivers or their teams, or their media partners, right? I think it's really important for us to start from that, and every sports organization that we work, and every customer actually we work from AWS perspective, we always start from there. And then work backwards. This is we are a customer-centric company, and I think a lot of the successful partnerships in sports that we see, we both share passion for innovation. And F1 is a great example because they have 75 years of history, and we see, and they have passion for innovation. There's constant effort to actually bring more data, more innovation to the story to enable not only the teams or the drivers, but also enable fans to really understand the race and have fun with it, right? So I think it's really important. And another example with Bundesliga, Germany's Premier Football League, we do a lot of work with them, and they have an ambition to be the most fan-centric football league in the world. And with that ambition, we also are the Earth's most customer-centric company, right? Like, it's a great vision to align. So we love sharing that passion of innovation And then anything we do, then we work backwards to use technology as an enabler to make that.
It would be my next question. If you have some ideas for other sports industries or with traditional businesses, what does it take? How is the strategy? But they can learn from Formula.
Formula One is a sport that's a really good pressure cooker for marginal gains. And within that, there's a lot of stories about that you don't get everything right the first time.
Yeah.
So if you look at last year's season, 1.3% we said between first and last on average. Those 1.3% was not got the first time every single time. If you look at the way a development cycle works in Formula One, it's about failing fast, failing quickly. And I think there's a lot of industries where if you're as an employee, you came up with 10 rubbish ideas and one idea that added 0.05% for 6 races before it was copied by your direct competitor and neutralized, you would be having a stern conversation with your manager. In Formula One, if you did that as a single individual, you would be promoted and probably, there'd be like a bus of you outside of your Formula One team, because that probably would have been an individual contribution that won you or gained your car several championship positions. Those are the margins that are so cool. And that culture of coming up with a problem, trying to solve it, we're finding out what works, what doesn't work, and driving innovation through relentless pursuit, through pulling at the strings of failure, taking in any single new technology and trying to see if that can give you an edge, and having a culture where coming up with a problem and trying to find a solution and working closely with your partners that enable you to do that at hyperspeed over your competitor is what makes Formula One a really wonderful, for me at least, environment to work at, which is why. And so when I'm asked, what would the face of AWS Insights look like next year? The answer is, I don't know, because it will be driven by what we see next year.
Okay, I see.
It will be the solution to the storytelling questions we have that come up through the race. Everything is driven by a user case of some story that we wanted to tell or some analysis that we wanted to be able to do, which is fantastic that we don't even know what we're going to be creating next year because it will be driven by the sport itself.
And I think just to add to that, we often say at AWS and Amazon, there's no compression algorithm for an experience, right? I think it's very important that being brave and looking at what is it really you're trying to achieve, problem you're trying to solve, and just don't be afraid of experimenting, no matter what industry is. I think that's, some of them might not be as successful, and we also have those examples in our history as well, but you learn a lot, and that really opens up to other innovations that may lead to something even bigger and better.
You're shaping the future of data and AI across industries in your role at AWS. What inspires you personally now to keep driving this transformation? Looking at the future a bit, and how do you envision shaping sports and entertainment industry?
Absolutely. So for me, it's a lot of fun. And with my background is coming from I'm an engineer actually, but so it's a very interesting, I know, it's a quite complex, and working in financial services and serving that kind of customer base, and then media entertainment and sports, and now retail and so forth, across industries. What I really see, and also this continues to happen, so the pace of innovation and the change of technology is huge and very accelerated right now. So we were talking about AI and machine learning, and generative AI came place, and now we are talking about AI agents. So the pace of technology the innovation is accelerated. And what is really important for all organizations are really to focus on their core businesses, their customers, and their internal employees, and increasing those efficiency, whether it's use of technology, generative AI to increase operational efficiency, or providing a better services for their fans or their customers, no matter what their insights are. So I think this acceleration is going to continue. So I don't know what is the next big thing after agentic AI, but I think there's a lot of, I see technology as us to serve better for basically their customers, let's call it that way for now. And for sports, I think there's a lot of generational change, not only the demographics. So like a lot of our sports customers, like I mentioned about Bundesliga, for example, they have more than 1 billion fans worldwide, and all sort of demographics from like, and so they would like to provide content that is accessible for each fan, that they can consume in their local language, their local style. And you know, with social media era, like some people don't want to read the long form articles. I want to swipe to make sure that I get the gist of it. So things like that we come up with, we think about how can we better serve the fan, that they can actually really understand the sports that they love, because any sports you're in, Formula One or football or, you know, like American football, it's a passion, it's emotion. There's so much involved, and like when you actually are able to provide this in their preferred choice of consumption, that really makes a huge difference to reach every fan globally.
Yeah. And Ruth, women are still rare, if that's fair to say, in senior technical and strategic roles in Formula One. Can you describe this as pioneers a little bit, like looking back at your own journey? What advice you give other women more interested in the role, right? And to take in such a role in Formula One, the sports industry?
I think Formula One has been a very rapidly changing space in that sense. Certainly in my lifetime, working in the sport, you know, our half-year report that we just published as Formula One. Now, 40% of our fan base is female. You know, 40% of it is under 35. So I think a lot of it about is you can't be all you can't see. You know, Formula One has spent a lot of time and effort trying to make sure that we change that narrative. You know, we want Formula One to be for everybody. We want to be a full quadrant sport. We would like everybody in the world to be watching Formula One, male, female, regardless of what country you're born in. And you know, obviously change doesn't happen overnight. Change often happens generationally. So encouraging grassroots, both motorsport from a driving perspective and from a STEM's perspective in terms of outreach to make sure that, you know, regardless of who you are, what skin color you are, Formula One is open for you, and we want everybody there. So I think it's a case of, you know, I think Formula One is showing and doing a good job of making sure that we are open. It's a safe space for everybody to come and to compete, and making sure that, you know, we also show for the geeks too. You know, if you want a data-driven story, come to us. You know, and that's what it is. It's meeting people where they are at. So whether it's the excitement of the sports side of it, you know, the data-driven stories, which is where I am as a fan, making sure that we as a sport are open and inviting. And I think having partners such as AWS enable us to do that.